always refer to me as a stranger. So those kids would always refer to me as a stranger. So, sorry. I was always the last one to be picked to join a team for school events, and I often had girls talking behind my back to coordinate and asking for information. Thank you for laughing. So when my family moved to Newcastle in the northeast England, from my European hometown in Japanese countryside, you can just imagine how my life just turned upside down. I was 9, and I've never even been to Tokyo in my whole life. But more importantly, me, was the fact that I could just get out of that small town and away from all these stupid little tricks of intimidation and start a whole new life without feeling any isolation from my peers. But I was wrong. Although I was surrounded by so many wonderful people, like thoughtful friends and caring teachers and friends that I will keep in touch with all my life, my new life in England didn't really give me that sense of integration that I hoped for. In fact, it brought me a stronger sense of segregation. And what's more, it brought me a sense of inferiority. I'm not saying that I was feeling alone all the time and I was, feeling miserable and would get stuck in my room and cry away in a corner of my room. I actually did get invited to all sorts of birthday parties and house dinners, and my teachers actually respected me. Not because I was a student who needs extra help, but because they thought I was a person with the potential to learn. Nonetheless, that inferiority stayed with me all the time. And I was thinking this must be due to my lack of ability to avoid the English language. I mean, I came to the UK only knowing how to say hello and where's the toilet. Very important. And, I thought maybe this was due to the fact that there's some kind of cultural differences. But now I think back, I actually think that it was actually the fact that I was constantly trying to calculate in my head what are the certain values and understandings of how things should be for the people of the UK. And that I literally believe that if I don't adhere to those values, I'll be checked out from the community, just like I got isolated back at home. So, we live in a world where particular ideas and norms are shared among the people that control the way we think, the way we make decisions, and the way we live our lives. And it's often thought as good or correct to engage with those ideas and norms, and even to reproduce them. So I can give you examples. We all believe that it's a good thing to take a good care of elder people. And we've all learned that stealing is bad, and we can't just steal because we want something. But what if all this is fake? What if all these common senses, as we say, are a type of social construct to benefit a particular group of people? So Antonio Gramsci used the term hegemonic to denote the predominance of one social class over others, and claimed that it's not only about political and economic control by the bourgeoisie, but also about the dominant class, the ability of the dominant class to project its own way of seeing the world so that those who are subordinated by it accept it as common sense. So we see this happening at international level too. In the study of international relations, the constructivist school argues that international relation is fundamentally shaped by shared meanings, norms, and ideas. And I think the international conference is a classical case of this, where you get to see those shared ideas actually being formed and modified. Treaties and agreements are a product, a result of hours and hours of negotiations to come to terms with interests of concerned parties. Through experiencing several international conferences and gatherings, I have come to realize that young and informed people, just like me and you, have a great risk of getting stuck in a decision-making process, and what's worse, unintentionally falling in a trap of reproducing hegemonic ideas and norms that are not necessarily apt for rapidly changing world that we live in today. So I can give you two examples. One example is from the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC COP15 conference. In December 2010, I was in Copenhagen with my colleagues from the World Student Environment Network, the NGO that I work for, to present our proposal to the Danish Minister of Climate and Energy. So within the framework of UNFCCC, there is a youth constituency called Yango, who's in charge of communicating with the UNFCCC Secretariat in place of youth. So during the first week of negotiations, there was this one side event slot scheduled for Yango to participate as a keynote speaker, along with UNFCCC Executive Secretary and scientists from Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC. As you all know, media attention on COP15 was just remarkable. So it really was a great opportunity to let our voices be heard. However, rather than discussing what is it that we want them to hear, what was prioritized the most was the decision-making process of who gets to go on that stage under all that attention. So as a result, we had no time at all to discuss and identify what is the actual message that young people around the world need those leaders to know. Second example is from UNESCO Youth Forum. This is an international conference that takes once every 2 years prior to the general conference. And the idea is to gather all the issues that young people face with today in relation to the work of UNESCO, and come up with the final report with recommendations that we presented at 6 commissions of the general conference. So the forum in 2011, last year, accommodated 210 youth delegates from 127 member states. I was there, and I was elected as the representative for the Asia Pacific region, along with other regional representatives for Africa, Latin America, Arab world, and Europe and North America, to chair regional meetings and write the final report in the drafting committee. So the ideas I consulted with delegates from the Asia Pacific region was just incredible. So to list a few: introduction of disaster risk management as a compulsory course at secondary schools, given the environmental vulnerability of the region. Engagement with youth, indigenous youth, in culturally appropriate educational environment. For example, in New Zealand and Indonesia. Prevention of the exploitation of youth and children at World Heritage Sites, etc. So we spent a sleepless night trying to combine all these recommendations together that we have consulted with the youth delegates into one report as much as possible. So we had a professional note taker and 2 UNESCO secretariats to advise us on the use of the appropriate UN language. through this process, so many of the great ideas and exciting ideas got replaced by the conventional terms and phrases to fit in the context of UNESCO. But then the report reached the final plenary session. When it reached the plenary session, it had lost its original form that other youth delegates were extremely discontented. And as a result of that, the session resulted in unprecedented 4 hours extension with almost a forced ending by a member of the Secretariat. So the atmosphere in the room was just distorted, full of anger and frustration, disappointment, and I just couldn't help but wonder, even if our recommendations were endorsed by member states, how could we, as youth delegates, could become the catalysts ourselves to bring changes on the ground when we know that those recommendations didn't really come from our heart? I need to clarify myself here. These 2 examples are not conspiracies of the United Nations or international negotiations. I believe in them. But these examples clearly show how easily one can get soaked in desire for fame and power, and how easily one can get constrained by institutional pressure. And I really think that young people are especially vulnerable to this, because we get filtered through so many prerequisites, such as qualifications, language abilities, work experiences, even to participate in these international conferences so that our voices will be heard, that we start to forget who are we actually representing, and we start to forget what our actual voices sounded like. In international organizations, especially at United Nations, following the conventional format of decision-making process is one of the most crucial factors. However, this could allow our knowledge to be exploited in reproduction of values and norms that could prevent needed changes from happening. So, let's admit it, we all have time and money to come here to listen to a TED Talk. We all had access to good education so that we can understand English language and most likely other languages too. We could easily become what Gramsci would call the bourgeoisie by complying with elitist ways of doing things. But is that really what we want things to be? All these SOAS students, have we not come this far so that we can speak up for the unheard voices? So Gramsci noted that common sense is not rigid nor immobile. It's actually constantly transforming itself. So I call on young, passionate, and educated people to think for a moment. How can we actually bring the change that I want to see in the world? If we can all disengage ourselves from reproducing these hegemonic ideas, then I truly believe that knowledge indeed will become true power.